Daniel chapter 10. Of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread, neither came no flesh nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till the 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And in the 24th day of the first month, as I was I was by the side of the great river which is Hiddekel, then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as the lamps of fire, and his arms and feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. And therefore I was left alone, and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me, for my comeliness was turned into me into corruption, and I retained no strength. And yet I heard the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground. And behold, an hand touched me, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. And he said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright, for unto thee am I now sent. And when he had spoken this word unto me, I stood trembling. And then said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for as yet the vision is many days. And when he had spoken such words unto me, I set my face toward the ground, and I became dumb. And behold, one like the similitude of the sons of men touched my lips. And then I opened my mouth and spake. And I said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. For how can the servant of the Lord talk strength in me? And he said, O man, greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be unto thee. Be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened. And I said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. And then said he, Knowest thou wherefore I am come to thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Greece shall come. But I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth. And there is none that holdeth with me in these things but Michael your prince. And I want to go ahead, and we're not going to cover this tonight, but I do want to go ahead and read the first verse of chapter 11. He says, Also I, this is not Daniel speaking, this is still the same person speaking. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. This is, as I've noted in the past, this is one of those kind of unfortunate chapter breaks. This is a really bad chapter break. The verse 1 really should go with chapter 10. We'll talk about that next week. But if you don't know that verse 1 goes with chapter 10, it's very easy to misinterpret verse 1 when you get to chapter 11, okay? But I just wanted to make that note. We'll talk about that more next week. And so here we have in chapter 10 what is essentially the introduction for a new vision given to Daniel that's going to last for the rest of the book. There's a short kind of prologue at the end of the book, but for all practical purposes, this vision is going to take us through to the end. And so like some of the other visions that we have seen, it involves tremendous specificity, tremendous detail. Now, we'll see that more in chapter 11, but there is so much detail within this particular vision. And like some of the others, it's going to take us to the very end, to the end of time itself. And so Daniel here is, again, kind of, God gave him these various visions, and they started kind of general, right? There's going to be kingdoms. And then over time, the visions that he's given, they kind of cover the same time period. Like I said, more so next week. And chapter 11, I don't know how long we're going to be in chapter 11, but multiple weeks. It's a long chapter, tremendous detail. And so we'll see that as we go forward. But here again is the introduction. And chapter 10 is a very interesting, fascinating chapter. We see some things in chapter 10 of Daniel that we don't see anywhere else in the Bible. And so there's a couple of things I want to point out, a few things that we need to see. And like I said, this is all kind of introduction for the vision itself. And so we're told in verse 1, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, this thing was revealed to Daniel. And it tells us whose name was Belteshazzar. Most people think, and I have no reason to disagree, most people think the reason we're given his name here is to kind of prove to us this is the same Daniel. We're not talking about a new Daniel. This is the same Daniel, and probably the reason why it does this is because by this point, Daniel has kind of retired. He's not in public service anymore. We're told way back in chapter 1, I think it's verse 21. Chapter 1, verse 21, it says, "And Daniel continued even into the first year of King Cyrus." This is the third year of King Cyrus, and so he's retired by this point. He's just a citizen now, I guess you could say. But I think it tells us there, make no mistake, this is the same Daniel. This is the guy who's had the visions, who has interpreted these visions. He's a trustworthy source. Nevertheless, he goes on, and he tells us for 3 weeks, he's been mourning. He tells us, "In the days I, Daniel, was mourning. I ate no pleasant bread. No flesh, wine came into my mouth. Neither did I anoint myself till 3 weeks were fulfilled." And so in the third year of Cyrus here, Daniel is distraught. Now, he doesn't tell us why. He doesn't give us, I was mourning for this purpose. But we can discern a few things here. Number one, this is being the third year of Cyrus. It would have been 2 years prior to this that the very first decree was given for the Jews to return from Babylon to Israel. And if you go read the book of Ezra, in particular, you will see that a relatively small number of Jews actually took it upon themselves to return. Only 42,000. And maybe that sounds like a large number, but most estimates say that the Jewish people during this particular time of Babylon were significantly higher in population. And I saw many people put those numbers well higher, some even up to 1 million Jews living in Babylon at this particular time. And so for there to be only 42,000 return, that may sound like a lot, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what they were. In other words, this has been the prayer of Daniel. This has been the prayer of the people. And when the time finally came, very few people actually took the initiative to go. So you might ask, well, why didn't Daniel himself go? Well, by this point, he's a very old guy. He's lived in Babylon his whole life. He spent his whole life serving this nation. I think if he'd been younger, I think he would have gone. And I saw some people speculate that maybe Daniel stayed to try and spur up the Jews that were still there to go. And I don't know. We're not told. That's speculation. But it's not surprising to me that Daniel would choose to stay. But I do think Daniel was probably a little disheartened by the fact that so few chose to return. And then furthermore, it has already been revealed to Daniel, and we saw this back in chapter 9, that when the Jews did return, that they would be facing troublous times. And so again, here we are 2 years prior, or 2 years after, we can't say, but we know that Daniel was told that they would be facing troublous times. And so, again, we're not told the exact reason here in chapter 10, but I do think we can probably discern some few things. If it's not this in total, I think these things definitely added to why Daniel here is so distraught. And so for 3 weeks, he's fasting, he's mourning, he's praying over this. Now, it doesn't say praying here, but later on in the chapter, we're told that he was praying, so we can add that in here. And so he's doing all this, and he's trying to reach out to God. And it was at the end of this 3-week period that something very odd happens. And so at the end of this 3-week period, he's out by the Tigris River. It's called the Hiddekel because that's the Hebrew word for it. We know it as the Tigris River. And so why he's there, we're not told. We don't know what he was doing out there. But Daniel is out by the Tigris, and it is at this point that he sees what the text calls a certain man. And the man is described in really fantastic terms. It says that he was clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body was like the beryl, his face as the appearance of lightning, his eyes as lamps of fire, his arms and feet like in color of polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. And upon seeing this guy, interestingly enough, Daniel sees him, but there's other people who are there. They don't see him, but they all of a sudden are strikingly alarmed and overcome with fear. And so the text tells us that they, in the middle of verse 7, it says, a great quaking fell upon them so that they fled to hide themselves. And so they don't know why they're scared. But everybody other than Daniel there, all of a sudden are overcome with fear, and they begin to flee hide themselves. Daniel alone can see what's going on because he's been given this vision. Now, Daniel, as far as himself, he doesn't fare a whole lot better. The text tells us that his strength left him. It says that his comeliness was turned to me into corruption. In other words, whereas he might have been, a relatively good-looking guy, now his face is just so contorted, and I mean, he's been fasting for 3 weeks, but also just with fear over what he's seeing. And then upon hearing the man's voice, Daniel, he completely passes out. He loses consciousness altogether. He faints, and he falls. He literally faints. Now, it should come as no surprise that there is a lot of debate as to who this individual is. And there's kind of two schools of thought of this. However, and I'll just cut to the chase on this, I think this is none other than Jesus himself. I think this is a pre-incarnate vision of Christ. And the reason why is because you go read the book of Revelation, and in chapter 1, John is also given a vision of Jesus. And you look at the descriptions of the men in Daniel 10 and Revelation 1, and they're practically identical. Revelation adds a little bit. It talks about his hair being white. But as far as the other explanations and descriptions, they are the same. And so here, I see this as Jesus himself. And so this, and furthermore, the reaction of Daniel and John are the same. Both of them basically fall down like they're dead. And you'll see that here. You see that in Revelation 1:17. And so, again, I see, and I'll talk about this when we get down to verse 13. There's a reason why people don't want this to be Jesus. And I understand, and I'll tell you this, I understand their argument. I just think that there's one key thing that they're missing in this chapter, okay? And so the debate is this is either Jesus or obviously some kind of angelic person, but I would see this as Jesus himself there in the flesh, revealing himself to Daniel for reasons I think we'll talk about just at the end tonight. But here he sees Jesus in the flesh, falls down, he has no strength, he's passed out, he's fainted on the ground, and then verse 10, it says, a hand touched me. Now, I think it's significant that it says a hand, not, and the man in the vision came and touched me. In other words, I do not think, well, this can't be Jesus. I would agree if this were the same person. So we'll see in a minute that this person is, obviously I believe this is an angel. That they're struggling and they're in a fight, a demonic fight, and they're actually held up for a little while. Obviously, that's not Jesus. Jesus doesn't struggle. There is no demonic force that can overcome him. And so if you believe that the person of the vision is the same in verse 10, that I could see why you would say it's not Jesus. But I don't think they're the same person. I think it's a different angelic being at this particular point. So Christ reveals himself, Daniel passes out, and then angels come to not only minister to Daniel, we'll see that at the end of the chapter, but to reveal this new prophet. But nevertheless, I do believe that we are now dealing with an angelic visitor to Daniel. And so the angel comes to him and he says, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright, for unto thee am I now sent. Another reason why I don't think this is Jesus, this angel, this person was sent to answer the prayers of Daniel. Jesus is not sent, Jesus sends, right? And so Jesus willingly comes to earth, but that was of his own initiative, right? And so here this person, again, this angel is sent and is under orders, you could say, to answer the prayers of Daniel. And so we've seen, and I just found this interesting, we've seen Daniel loved by others. This has kind of been a common theme for Daniel. He worked hard, he was personable, he was likable everywhere he went. And even the pagans who were, opposed to him in thought and in religion loved him and came to love him. The only ones who really didn't love Daniel were the ones who were trying to tear down Daniel so that they could get in a politically higher position. But those who actually knew Daniel, they loved him. But here the implication is that he's greatly beloved by God. Right? This is the angel speaking. O Daniel, a man greatly beloved. And so I'll quote Archer here. He said, observe that Daniel's privileged status as one especially precious to God resulted from his complete absorption in the will and glory of the Lord, to whom he had yielded his heart. His was the whole-souled devotion of a Paul or a Moses, right? And so this is why we would say that Daniel here is being called greatly beloved, because he did everything that he did for the purposes of God. And that becomes very, very clear as you read through the book of Daniel. And so here, the angel then comes to him, he says, verse 12, he says, fear not. Now you might think, and maybe this is part of it, but you might think that was in relation to what he had just seen, right? He saw Christ, he's passed out. The angel comes to him and tells him, fear not. And again, maybe there's a little bit of that there, but that's not really the reason why he says, fear not. He says, for the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before God, thy words were heard, and I'm come. Right? So why is he telling him to fear not? Because your prayer has been answered. It's just that the answer didn't get here as quickly as you might have wanted it to get here. And there's a very fascinating reason why. And so verse 13 is certainly a fascinating verse, and you can add into that in conjunction verse 20. And so verse 13, let us read it. It says, but the prince of the king of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the king of Persia. And so what is he talking about here? Daniel was told that you started praying, and the second you started praying, God sent the answer. But the answer was upheld for 3 weeks, 21 days, because the kingdom, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood him. And so amazingly here, we're told that the answer to Daniel's prayer was obstructed for 3 weeks by a demon. And you say, why do you think it's a demon? Well, because first of all, this being is keeping an angel from doing what it's intending to do. But also within the verse, the beginning of the verse, he talks about the prince of the kingdom. If this is an angelic being and it is opposing a God-sent angel, we're left with no other option than to see that this is a demon. This is a messenger, not of God, but this is a messenger of Satan. And he was sent to obstruct the answer to Daniel's prayer getting to him right when Daniel started praying. And let me just add this for a second. God knew that was going to happen. God was not up in heaven thinking, oh my goodness, that answer was supposed to get there 3 weeks ago. No. God was sovereign over all of this. The answer got to Daniel exactly when God wanted it to get to Daniel. And so we can rest assured upon that. Now, we also see that this demon is called the prince of the kingdom of Persia. There's a lot of things I want to say about this, and I'll try to keep this brief. And so what we take away from verse 13 is we see that Satan has demons aligned with the ongoings and the workings of political peoples and nations, which makes sense. In other words, Satan has a demonic network working behind the scenes, attempting to stop the will of God from taking place. And I don't think any Christian would deny this. It's just there's nowhere else in the Bible that we see it in such black and white. And so one great thing that happens as a result of verse 13 is it shows us the reality of the spiritual war that's taking place that we can't see. Right? There's a constant battle taking place between the forces of God and the forces of Satan, and it's this ongoing thing, and it's there, it's real, it has tangible consequences, but we just can't see it. This is exactly the reason why Paul tells us in Ephesians 6 that we are in a spiritual battle. Right? Nobody chooses this. You don't get to choose to be in the battle. You are in the battle. You're either fighting for God or against God. There are no other choices in this. And so here the kingdom, the prince of the kingdom of Persia was obstructing this angelic answer to Daniel's prayer. I'll quote Walvoord. He said, although the entire subject of the unseen struggle between the holy angels and the fallen angels is not clearly revealed in the Scriptures, from the rare glimpses which are afforded, as in this instance, it is plain that behind the political and social conditions of the world there is angelic influence. This is the struggle to which Paul referred in Ephesians 6. And so when Paul says we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, right, but against principalities, against powers, this is what he's talking about. Now, there is something else that I need to say. And I didn't put this in the lesson, but I think it's important, and so just give me just a few minutes as an aside. I'll try and be brief. from Daniel 10:13, there has arisen a doctrine. Now they will apply other scriptures as well, but the doctrine would not exist if we did not have this section of Scripture, 13, verse 13 in particular. And so there's a doctrine that is referred to as territorial spirits. Territorial spirits. Now this is, I don't want to say exclusively a charismatic doctrine, but it is heavily influenced by the charismatics. Okay, and so they have what they refer to as territorial spirits or territorial demons, and they will apply to Daniel 10:13. Like I said, there's a couple of the scriptures they use, but they only interpret them as they do in light of Daniel 10:13. And the doctrine is simply put that it's exactly as it sounds, that Satan has established territorial demons, that a particular demon is not in control of a person or a group of people, but specifically a geographical area. And so there was a Persia demon, and that particular demon was in control of the ongoing things that were happening in Persia. And so they will say that there are city territorial demons, state territorial demons, and just, it broadens out from there. And the only reason I bring it up is because they have, from this, there has morphed this idea, and a lot of this comes from what's referred to as the deliverance ministries. From this has morphed this idea that Christians have to go into cities or states or new countries or whatever it is, and Christians have to first go bind the territorial demons before they can go in and do any gospel work. And so you have to bind the territorial demons, and only then can the gospel truly flourish. I actually read one guy, and I can't remember his name, but he actually said that all evil in the world is the direct result of territorial demons. All evil in the world is the result of territorial demons. And so they would say, Jesus said you got to bind the strong man, right? And so they say that you got to bind Satan, you got to bind his demons, territorial demons, and then only then can you really do the work of a Christian. Now, the big problem that I have with this is that it negates individual responsibility. Okay, and so if their doctrine is correct, then I should be able to. Let's just say it this way. All of this stuff has been in the news about Washington D.C. and the crime that goes on there. Let's just say that I took every person living in Washington D.C. right now, and I moved them to, and I'm just going to use for the sake of argument, for Midlothian, right? And so Washington D.C., heavy crime; Midlothian, not so much crime. All right, and so you take every person from Washington, D.C., and you move them to Midlothian. You take every person from Midlothian, move them to Washington, D.C. Their argument would have to say then that all the people, because now they are under the influence of the territorial demon of Washington, D.C., right? And so what that does then is it takes away the personal responsibility, the sins, we should say, of the people actually committing these acts and saying, no, it wasn't me, it was the demon. It wasn't me, it was the demon. And so this is, to me, it's a dangerous doctrine because as soon as you start taking away personal responsibility, then people can do whatever they want and just say, well, it wasn't me. I was just being influenced. Now, I'm not diminishing the influence of demons. It is real. It exists. But I do deny the existence of a geographic, a territorial demon, that they are not concerned with individuals or peoples, but they are simply concerned with, this is my geographical land, and I'm going to control all the evil and wicked that takes place in this particular area. And I would think that, I don't think that's what this chapter is saying. I think this particular demon was concerned with the prince of Persia. Why? Because Persia was the predominant world power. If you were going to influence evil and wicked in the world at this particular point, it was through Persia that you would do it. He says in verse 20, the prince of Greece is coming. Why? Because they're the next world power, right? Not because there's a geographical area and whoopsie, Greece just happened to fall into that demon's territory. He's good at what he does. Now, he's evil, he's wicked, but he's good at being evil and wicked. Okay, and so we got to understand what it is we're up against, and that there is an actual ongoing spiritual battle. But this idea that it's all because of these territorial, they're misinterpreting, I believe, Daniel chapter 10. Okay, all that aside, we get back to the text. But we do see here in verse 13, this demon, and just to kind of give us an idea of what we're up against, this demon was so strong. So able to withstand this angel that he was unable to overcome him alone. He needed the help of Michael. And so we understand Michael and his power, and that he's, verse 13 tells us one of the chief princes, one of the chief angels. And so he couldn't do it alone. He had to have Michael come. And so and by the way, and I'll just parlay this into another conversation very quickly. Nowhere in the text of Scripture are we told as Christians to go looking for demons to exorcise, right? We're never told to do that. And that's another thing with these territorial demons, right, is that they'll go into these places and they say, well, we need to go out and bind them. Nowhere do we see that ever in Scripture. Now, they performed exorcisms when they were confronted by demons, right? Jesus cast out demons. The apostles were casting out demons. But it's not as if they were going out into the cities and saying, hey, everybody who's possessed, just come on down and we're going to have a big old exorcism party. No, that's not how these things happened. And I'll just add this, and I just got to say one last thing. They have these now. They have deliverance ministries. They have deliverance events where they will come in and they will say, well, you've got a demon of back pain. You've got a demon of lust. You've got a demon of everything. Everything's a demon. And so they'll say, you got to get this demon cast out. You need this demon cast out. It'll make your life better. And demons are an unruly group of beings until all the people who supposedly have demons are patiently standing in a line waiting for their turn to get the demons cast out of them. And so they're at these deliverance events, and you have a line of 30 people who supposedly are all demon-possessed, and they're just standing there patiently waiting until they get up to the guy doing the exorcisms, and then the demon comes out, and they act all crazy. It's a fantastical idea of what is taking place in the Scriptures, and it makes the guy casting them out look real good, but it's very poor biblical theology. But anyways, so Michael has to come in. But now he's able to come and answer the prayer. And so he comes to answer Daniel's prayer, and he helps them. It says, understand what shall befall thy people. And so again, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with Israel, right? That's what this is about. We're dealing with Israel. Same thing with Daniel's 70 weeks. It involves Gentiles. It involves Gentile nations. But it is about Israel. That's what the vision is for. And so same thing that we're dealing with in chapter 9. And so Daniel is so overwhelmed by all this that he's literally struck dumb. He can't speak. And that's understandable. He's just learned a lot, and he's just seen a lot. And so he can't speak. Another angel at this point comes and touches Daniel on the lips, and it gives him the ability to speak. But Daniel is, again, he's still so overcome. He basically says, there's nothing I could even say right now. I got no breath in my lungs. I'm still so weak. This is just too much right now. I don't even know what I would say. And then another angel comes and touches Daniel, and it says it strengthens him. And so this is interesting because it's reminiscent of Jesus in the garden. Jesus is weak. He's praying in the garden, and we are specifically told in Luke 22 that there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. Right? And so the angels have this ability to help, to strengthen. And so they're doing this for Daniel as they would later do for Christ himself. And so now he's strengthened. He has the ability to speak. And he essentially tells the angel who's been speaking with him the whole time, just go ahead and say what you're going to say, right? Or speak on. And so the angel tells him, listen, I've got some more fighting I got to do. Which is interesting, verse 20. Right? I'm gonna, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to go fight this demon some more. And then another demon's coming, the prince of Persia. And so, right, there's some fighting that's got to go on. But what you need is so important. The fighting had to come on hold, and I had to come reveal these things to you. And so basically the angel's telling Daniel, understand how important this is. Look what had to be stopped in order for me to come to you and to answer this particular question. Now, it would be an encouragement to Daniel to know that both this angel and Michael, potentially other angels, that they are going to fight on the behalf of God. And so he tells them, the last verse, verse 21, says, but I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth. And there is none that holdeth with me in these things but Michael your prince, right? We're doing this together. And so this would be an encouragement to Daniel. Furthermore, and I would add to this, that it would be an encouragement to Daniel for what he saw earlier, right? He saw God himself in the person of Jesus. And so I would think that this would be such an encouragement to know not only that this one that you saw that was so amazing and so incredible and so fearful that it led you to fall on your face, it led everybody else who didn't even see him to flee in fear, even though they didn't even know what was going on, to know that that was the one that you were fighting for, and also on the other side of it, that that was the one fighting for you and for your people. And so again, what an encouragement to Daniel to have these angelic beings come to him, to have Christ himself come to him, and to let him know we have things under control, and the prophecy that we are giving to you, it is sure. Again, to go back to verse 1, it says the thing was true. Right? There's no doubting this. God himself has given it. God himself will see it through. And so, like I said, we didn't get into the prophecy really in earnest here in chapter 10. That will come in chapter 11. And we're going to see some really, like I said, detail in chapter 11, and really on into chapter 12 as well, with regards to this final prophecy, final vision, final revelation given over to Daniel. And then we'll be finished with the book. And sad day that will be, but it's been a wonderful study. Okay, before prayer.